Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a big brake upgrade on my Gen 2.5 Montero. So when I talk about a big brake upgrade, what I'm going to do is upgrade the size of the rotors in the front of the Montero. I'm actually not going to touch the rear, although I am going to do a brake job on them. But I'm going to be increasing the size of the rotor. And there's a few different things I want to talk about with this swap. The first one is that every single component that I'm going to be using for this is off of a Montero Sport. So the Montero Sport had the same brake setup, but the caliper was a little more offset. And what that means is the rotor can be an inch bigger. So when I went shopping for these parts, I just went shopping for a 2003 all-wheel drive Mitsubishi Montero Sport with 16-inch rims. And I'll get to that 16-inch rim bit in a little bit, but what that's doing is it's actually moving the same caliper that you already have on your Montero out by 1 inch, allowing for a bigger rotor, and that's how you get the big brake upgrade. So it's actually very cheap to do this. It's very inexpensive because these are all normal parts for another Montero. You're just swapping it onto here. Now, I mentioned a 16-inch wheel, and these come stock with 15s, and so the one downside of this upgrade is you have to get a 16-inch or bigger wheel. Now, these are 17s, and so I'm going to have no problem clearing the bigger rotor. But before I get too much further, let me show you what those two components look like side by side, and I'm going to get this car out on a test drive and show you how it stops right now with the current brakes. So for comparison, here's the stock rotor off the Montero, and then you can see the Montero Sport rotor, which is going to be just 1 inch bigger. But it's pretty significant when you overlay it like this. As far as like the thickness and the design, they're the same. This one is just smaller and this one is just bigger. The caliper brackets are a little harder to see, but from this angle you can tell this one is clearly smaller and this one is bigger. So all it's doing is as it sits on the body of the vehicle, it's actually coming out a little further, and that's to make up for this bigger rotor. So that's the difference when you put them side by side between the Montero and the Montero Sport components. So here's something that's going to be very hard to convey over video is the brake feel. There's a couple different ways you can measure brake feel. Now, this is obviously not a track car, and so there's going to be different characteristics about braking that don't really matter for me. But a few things I'm really concerned about is confidence in the brakes, the bite of the brake. Does it feel like the brakes are really grabbing on, or is it like more of a suggestion and it takes a long time to get to that point where it's like, oh, these are actually going to stop me? So I won't be able to convey that other than just explaining my thoughts before and after. But I can tell you right now, these brakes are very uninspiring. Even unloaded, it does not feel like it's gonna slow me down a whole lot. So hopefully I can get some good data that'll actually show that. But I thought it'd be worth mentioning, there's a lot more to braking than just the numbers. It's also how it inspires confidence for the driver. I'm on a road here where I can go a little faster. It's not exactly dead flat, but I'm gonna get up to 60 miles an hour and see how long it takes me to stop in a controlled manner. So right now, we're creeping up on 60. Gonna hold 60 for just a minute here. Starting braking in 3, 2, 1, now. This is hard on the brakes, coming to a stop right now. Okay. I'm gonna have to get the timer up on the screen for that because I don't actually know, but that felt like it took forever. I can probably step on the brakes a little harder, but the idea is controlled braking here. I don't want to cause it to do anything weird. The nice thing is this thing does brake in a straight line. So we'll give it another shot here. Creeping up on 60 now. 60 miles an hour. Braking in 3, 2, 1, go. Hard on the brakes, all the way into the floor, stopping now. God, I cannot tell you guys how unconfidence inspiring that feels. I mean, it feels like it takes forever to stop. So with that test drive and those comparisons out of the way, let's jump into this brake swap. Okay, we're gonna get started on the driver's side here, and we're gonna have to disassemble quite a few things. The big difference between this and a normal brake job is that you actually have to pull off like this whole hub assembly. You're actually gonna be splitting it pretty much in half because this guy right here is bolted to the rotor. So quite a bit of stuff needs to come off. You're gonna be adjusting the wheel bearing, as well as removing, like I said, that whole spindle. So it's not as simple as pop this off, take the rotor off, slap the rotor on, put it back together. So we're gonna get into that. The first thing you're gonna need to do is pull off this dust cap. I'm gonna get a pry bar in there, and then there's a circlip inside with a shim behind it. So there's that dust cap removed, as well as the circlip, and here's that little shim that goes behind it. Make sure not to lose that. It's not super mission critical, but it sets kind of the back and forth motion for the CV axle. Next thing you're gonna do is remove all of these 14mm bolts and pull this hub off. Now with that hub face removed, you can see in here, there's a bunch of grease, but you're going to have a lock nut. It's gonna have these Phillips, or these are actually JIS screws on here, and you can kind of see it in here. There's another one. On this particular model, there's 2. On the Gen 1s, I think that there are 4. But you're gonna pull those guys out. Be very careful with those to make sure not to strip them, otherwise you're in for a world of hurt. They shouldn't be on too tight, but you're gonna remove those, then you're gonna get a pick in there, and you're gonna pull out the lock ring that they are holding down. Here's what that lock ring looks like, all cleaned up, and outside you can see it just holds that in place so that this wheel bearing kind of retaining nut doesn't back out. That way you can set it and it's not gonna move, or it's not gonna get out of whack with the rotation. The next thing to do is take out that retaining lock nut. I'm not sure what to call it, preload adjuster. And for that, I'm going to be using this tool. And before I get into this, let me just say Lusso Overland makes one of these. It's better than this. Just go buy his tool. I made this years ago before he made it. And that's the part number. I got it from O'Reilly's. And then I just ground it down to fit with these hubs. His is way better. Just go buy his. It's probably cheaper than what I did. But I've got this one. I've had it for years. And so this is what I'm going to use right now. You just got to get this in here and line it up. And eventually, whether you're using the O'Reilly's one or the Lusso Overland one, it's going to latch in here. Now, if you have an impact, you can just put an impact on there and you can take it off. Or you can stick a screwdriver in the rotor and you can kind of jam it in there and then use a pry bar or a ratcheting wrench to loosen this up. But either way, you're going to want to take that off, and then you're going to pull out the wheel bearing. So with that removed, you can see that outer wheel bearing. And so now we're going to pull that off, but the easiest way to do it is just to pull the whole rotor off. And so we're going to remove the caliper. The caliper comes off just like any other caliper. You're going to have 2 bolts up here. You'll have 2 in the back holding the caliper hanger on, and you want to pull both of those off as well. They're all going to be 17s. So I'm going to get that pulled off. I'm going to get this hung up out of the way over here, and then we'll get to actually pulling this rotor and hub assembly off. Okay, getting these guys out for future reference. The one that is, it's supposed to have a rubber grommet on there, but this one goes in the bottom, and the one that is smooth the whole way across, that one goes in the top. So when you're putting these back in, this one's on the bottom, that one's on the top. So now that we got the caliper taken off, I'm gonna go ahead and get it hung up, then we'll pull off the caliper bracket. Now, after removing the 17s that hold this caliper bracket on, you are gonna have one more bolt right here that's going to attach to this backing plate. That is a 10mm. Remove that, then you'll be able to pull this bracket off. With the caliper bracket out of the way, you should be able to remove this. Keep in mind, there is a wheel bearing in there. So as you pull this whole hub assembly off, this wheel bearing is gonna wanna fall. And so I'm probably gonna jump out here with 2 hands and get this off the vehicle. Then we'll get into disassembling this hub, and I'll show you how to swap over the rotor. So this is where I get to admit that I screwed up. I forgot to order these backing plates. So not ideal, but it's late on a Saturday night. I'm not about to pause this job and wait for them. I'm gonna keep going. So if you are smart and you're watching this video before you do it, go ahead and order these backing plates. But if you end up in a situation like me, all you really need to do is cut this part of the backing plate off. Now, obviously, it's not good because you want to have this to make sure rocks and debris don't get in there. But like I said, this is where we're at. So the new rotor is not going to fit with this on here. So I'm just going to take an angle grinder and I'm going to cut right here. The rest of it should fit okay. I'm just going to trim that up, and then I'm going to go ahead and order up these backing plates. And next time I'm in here, I'll do it the right way. So I'm going to get that cut off and get the new rotor installed. Okay, so we've got the rotor and the hub assembly on the bench, and this is going to be a little bit of a pain because these bolts back here go through a lot of heat cycling. You can see I've already got them soaking in WD-40, but there's 2 sets of bolts. The first one is going to be for this ABS ring, if your model has it, and the second one is going to be through bolts, these guys right here, and they come out this other side and they actually secure this hub to the rotor. they are not going to want to come out in most cases. I don't even live in a rusty area, and these are still pretty corroded. So you can use penetrating fluid, you can use heat, whatever you need to do. Just be careful of this seal right here to get these out. The other thing is, I've got a set of deep well impact sockets here, and you can see it just doesn't get in there. So I have to use this little chrome guy, and we'll see if it's up for the task. I'm gonna get that in there, and I'm gonna use my biggest impact that I have. So that's what I'm gonna do, put something on the backside. If you do not have an impact like this, you're gonna have to chuck this up in a vise or something and really get some leverage on it. You can maybe put a rag here and pinch the rotor, but that force is gonna be really tough. So anything you can do to get that leverage on there to break those loose, just do what you gotta do. So I'm gonna pull these off first. These are 12 millimeters. I'm gonna pull the ABS ring off to get that out of the way, and then I'm gonna get to pulling those guys out. Okay, screws are out. ABS ring is separated, and now we've got the hub assembly and the rotor ready to come apart. It's gonna be right in between here is where it's gonna come apart. And the easiest way to do it is with an air hammer. You could also use a chisel. Another side note, if you need to go longer studs, this is the time to do it. I think I can get away with the ones I have right now with the wheels I've got. But either way, I'm gonna get this air chisel in here, and I'm gonna work my way across. Be really careful not to damage anything, but you wanna separate these two pieces right here. Once we get those separated, we can get to installing the new rotor. All right, the next thing is gonna be to clean up this lip right here. You wanna make sure that all corrosion is off of this so that it secures itself nice and flat. So I'm gonna use a flap disc to do that. Then we're gonna be laying this right on top, making sure it lines up and bolting the whole thing together, including the ABS ring. Okay, that went back together. Now it's time to get it all cleaned up. Make sure, just because you're dealing with so much grease, and especially from the wheel bearings and stuff, make sure this backside is real clean before we put it on here. Which reminds me, I need to remove this. And that's what that looks like cut off. It's nothing pretty, but it is functional. Like I said, the other rotor won't fit on here. So if you are seeing this video, do it right, get the bigger one. But I just zipped that off. Now it's time to get this whole thing slapped together. So now that the rotor's on, again, make sure it's all cleaned up with brake clean, and then we're just going to do the reverse of removal, and we're gonna put the wheel bearing in, make sure that that is secure in there, and then we're going to get this kind of preload or retaining nut, and we're gonna cinch that down. And I'm gonna show you guys how to set the hubs on these, how to set the preload on that. So I'm just gonna get this mocked up right now, get it mostly tightened down, and then we're gonna have to lower the vehicle and set that. But first we're gonna finish the brake job and actually get this caliper and the brake pads in. So I'm gonna get that kind of finger tight in there, and then we're gonna get to finishing up the brake job. So here's our new caliper bracket. And one of the things that didn't come with it is these little dust boots for the caliper slides. So I pulled those off my other ones. I'm using new hardware here, and it's the exact same orientation. It's gonna go on exactly like the other one did, using the same hardware. So I'll get that installed, get that caliper compressed, get the brake pads loaded up in here, and the brake job will be done. Now for brake pads, I'm using these import direct ones from O'Reilly's. I've had really good luck with these. I find them to be really grippy. Came with a bunch of new hardware that I'm gonna get loaded up on this new caliper. And then it clearly says right here, whether it's gonna be the outer or the inner on the left hand. And that's mostly the orientation of this guy right here, which is to indicate when your brakes get really low. So yeah, I really like these pads. In the past, I've used other ones, but these ones have been working out really well for me. And so I'm gonna throw them on here. So I'm gonna get this all set up in the car with the new bracketry, and then get that in. So now that we got the brake job all finished up, it's time to reset the preload on this hub. Now this is where having this tool is absolutely crucial. The one from Lusso Overland is probably a little bit better. The procedure that I have for this might be a little different than the factory service manual. And if you're good, you can just do this by feel. And if you can do it by feel and you know what you're doing, that might be the easiest way. However, if you don't, let me walk you through what I do. So first thing I do is with the wheel off, I'm gonna slide a screwdriver into the rotor right here. That way it can't move, it's locked in place. If for some reason you don't wanna do that, you could put the wheel on the vehicle and lower it down, but then you're gonna be doing something different with the hub. It's gonna be kind of under torque. So I don't recommend that. I recommend just sticking a screwdriver or an extension in there. Then you're going to take your hub tool and you're going to attach it here, and you wanna torque this thing down to 120 foot-pounds. 120 foot-pounds tight, and then you're going to loosen it all the way until it's absolutely loose. Then you're going to torque it again to 18 foot-pounds, and then my instructions at least say to back it off between 30 and 40 degrees. So it's going to, basically what you're doing is you're tightening it all the way down, loosening it, setting it again, and then backing it off just a little bit. What you're doing is you're creating a tight enough space that is not going to walk around and create excess wear, but it's also leaving enough room that as things heat up, it can expand a little bit without it getting into a bind. So that's how you set up the wheel bearings. So I'm going to go ahead and get that wrapped up, and then the next step is to install this lock ring. So with this all torqued down to spec, it's time to install this lock ring, and you can kind of see it in the grease here. There's where that wants to line up. And then if you look over here, there's the holes where the screw can go through. Now the instructions say if those holes don't line up exactly, you actually can loosen it another 20 degrees to make sure that they line up. You don't want to go tighter, you'd rather err on the side of loose, but you don't want it to be too loose. So I'm gonna follow that procedure. I'm gonna go ahead and sink those 2 set screws in there. They don't need to be in there super tight, just tight enough to hold that in, and then we can get to assembling the rest of the hub. Set screws are in. Next thing is to put on this hub face, get it lined up with the axle and twist it if you have to. Go ahead and sink that in. Get these guys tightened down, and then we're gonna be putting on the snap ring. Before that, we're gonna have this little shim, the snap ring, and then finally the dust cover. After that, this side will be all wrapped up. We'll hit the passenger side. Now the rear brakes are gonna be very simple in comparison to the front ones. It's your traditional, you've got a rotor and a caliper, but we're gonna remove these 2 bolts, remove the caliper bracket. We're not changing it out because the backside doesn't get any bigger. We're just gonna be replacing it with a new rotor because this side's pretty jacked up, the other side's even worse, and the pads are really low. So this is just gonna be your traditional brake job, but I'm gonna get that knocked out. That way we have new brakes in the front and rear. Then we're gonna go on test drive and see how much better the stopping is. Okay, so new brake pads and bigger rotors are installed. Obviously it's at night, but we're gonna do the same braking test and see how much better these things stop. So we're going right now, getting up to 60. There's 60, and hard on the brakes. Oh yeah. As they're stopped. Okay, getting up to 60. Cruising at 60 now. Braking in 3, 2, 1, now. And stopped. Ooh, a little bit of smoke coming off these brakes, getting them bedded in. That's good. I have no idea if that's faster or slower, but it feels way more bitey, which is what you want. So there's the on-road braking test, and it's hard to tell, but the braking is so much better. And that was when I was just bedding in the brakes. Since then, I've had a lot more miles on them. I've done a road trip. I've gone up and down so many mountain passes. I've gone off-roading with them, and they are so much more crisp, more confidence-inspiring. They brake way better. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do an apples to apples test with them because I've modified the vehicle quite a bit, which you guys will see in upcoming videos. I've added all sorts of things weight-wise that are gonna just make it so it's probably still a good test, but the results aren't the same. So I think this is way worth it. And I have to say, when I started this, I didn't think it was going to be worth it. I feel like on my other Montero, I just did not notice the difference as much. And I thought, I don't know if I want to go through all that work. But when I saw that the rotors were in such bad condition and I had to do the pads, I thought I might as well upgrade. Now, after doing it, after feeling and seeing the results, I would say this is almost a must do if you have a Montero of this age. Obviously, getting better brake pads is going to help immensely, but having that extra inch on the rotors, adding that bite, adding that confidence, now I feel like compared to what it was before, it just felt so reckless on the road. It felt like something I had to be way ahead of where the traffic was going to be. I had to be thinking so far ahead. And now, not like I'm going to be negligent, but it just feels like a normal car. It feels like it'll stop when I want it to stop. And that's what I'm excited about. So not only is it great on-road, it actually is amazing off-road to have that control, that slow speed when you're descending rocks or hills. This is a huge win. So this one blew me away. I did not think this was going to be as good of a modification as it ended up being. And if you're on the fence about doing it, I highly encourage you, go ahead and do the big brake upgrade. Even if your pads and rotors are good, I think it's well worth it. So thanks for hanging with me on this one, guys. If you have any questions, put them down below, and I'll catch you on the next one.